Investing in climate we view as one of the major opportunities of a generation. It is rare in any lifetime to have an opportunity like this where essentially the whole world needs to remake its capital stock in a way that is sustainable.
New leaders are going to be created, new business models are going to be created, new opportunities for profit pools are going to be created. Behind that will be enormous opportunity and enormous complexity.
We went through a period where renewables were venture investments or growth investments, where we were still trying to figure out the technology. If you think about what's happened as the industry's evolved, cost curves have come down, and these solutions now are cost competitive with other forms of power. And so in my mind, we almost have to start thinking about the power markets in general and how cleaner energy can play the role that it's going to have to play, because oftentimes it's cheaper and almost always it's faster in terms of deployment.
So our grid of the future has myriad distributed generating assets. It has a lot more complexity. There's a much bigger role for technology to play in managing that complexity. So as we go through this transition from a very simple network to a very complicated one, there has to be a lot of investment and there has to be a lot of change. TRC was built on a view that if you're serious about decarbonizing our economy, you need to take a very broad approach. You need to pursue 100 pathways, and you need to understand each one of them to understand all of them, because in many ways they're connected.
For us in climate, what does that mean? It means clean electrons, thinking about ways to electrify, starting with solar power and wind power, other renewable power, and lithium ion, which obviously is what's powering vehicles and other things today. The clean electrons power the next piece of the equation, which is sustainable materials and sustainable molecules. You use green power to create fuels and materials that are clean. That's the next big vertical for us. There's also then the fact that we have to find ways to pull CO2 out of the environment and adapt to the fact that there is a base level there that's going to be there for a long period of time. That's our third vertical. We think about that as adaptive solutions. That's carbon markets, that's grid resiliency, that's disaster relief.
When we think about clean electrons, first of all, you need as much clean green power as you can. And then you need to take those green electrons as far into our economy as you can. And that the first big area you can jump into is transportation. Electric vehicles are competitive, if not now cheaper, than conventional vehicles. So when we think about green mobility, the sort of first step is, right, well, let's think about charging infrastructure and how we make that work. As you get sort of deeper into decarbonization, you're then thinking about how you decarbonize heavy transportation, whether that's ferries or ships or aircraft.
The perhaps biggest issue that consumers have in buying an electric car is range anxiety. The key to solving that is better and better battery technology. We have partnered with Applied Materials, which has been developing a product that enables higher and higher energy density in a battery. By carving this business out of Applied Materials, we have created a supplier into the lithium-ion battery world, which enables higher energy density. So this is the kind of deal that only TPG could do, where you're carving out a very complicated business from a corporate parent that will remain our partner in it. And that's just one example of how the TPG private equity toolkit can be applied to the energy transition to bring better batteries to the market to make the adoption of electric vehicles go even faster.
It was always clear to us that the downstream piece, the end consumer of electrons, is going to be key to bringing about a total transition. And that's been the case, especially in more developed parts of our world, in Europe and North America, where we've seen consumers being prepared to invest their own capital behind green solutions for the home. So Empower's an investment we have in Europe. It is Europe's largest and fastest growing home decarbonization platform. They started their journey as a leasing business, leasing solar panels to go on residential dwellings. And as the business has grown, they are close now to becoming a total home decarbonization solution. So they can lease you, they can sell you, you can buy from them solar panels for the roof, batteries to go in the basement, heat pumps to go in the garden, an EV charger, a smart meter. And then the most exciting thing is when you connect all of those assets across a cohort of customers, you can then sell them back into the grid as what is known as a virtual power plant and create flexibility and ancillary services for the grid.
Negative emission fits within our broader adaptive solutions bucket. As we think about the world decarbonizing, there are some sectors that are really hard to decarbonize. Adaptive solutions deals with this first and last mile of carbon emissions, and then negative emissions sits within that bucket and says, well, when you're running this equipment or when you have these effects, how can we correspondingly navigate those emissions? Anew is a solutions provider for those who acknowledge that their business is going to have a component of emissions. As a responsible corporate, you say, I actually want to offset that component of my emissions. What can I do? You would go to a company like Anew who can help you offset your emissions. So if you view them as a microcosm for the need to decarbonize, there's a lot of information value in not only what Anew represents, but what our portfolio represents and the growth behind it.
One of the fascinating features of this energy transition is we are doing it against a backdrop of rapidly rising energy demand. It's hard enough to do an energy transition when demand's flat, but we're trying to do one as demand is growing. And the key drivers of that demand are data centers, the desire for compute, and the renewable solution needs to be a scale solution. So we completed a partnership we're very proud of between one of our portfolio companies, Intersect Power, and Google at the end of last year in 2024, which will see Intersect build vast amounts of renewable power and firm that power with batteries and the grid and potentially gas to provide baseload power to Google's data center operations. And I think this is something we're going to see more of, large-scale partnership arrangements to ensure that this demand can be met in the future. It can be met with a green solution. It can be met at the lowest possible cost. And it can be done in a way that gives the users of that power a lot of security of supply.
There are moments, for example, if the power goes out, you need a backup power generator. This is not just for data centers, it's for hospitals, multiple use cases. In those instances, how do you decarbonize the emissions that are coming from running an essential service? So a specific example would be a portfolio company called Miratech. They are a market leader in coming up with solutions that allow data centers to run clean in the event that backup power is needed. It is literally on the perimeter of the data center, but it has the same macro tailwinds driving its growth. Not only are we looking at it through a climate lens, we're looking at it through a software lens, we're looking at it through a real estate lens. So we're able to pull in resources across our liability pools to give us real edge. So I think that is a defining feature which we can be leaning into, and we have been leaning into.
Let's talk about the state of the infrastructure market. First of all, it's a market that has grown exponentially really over the last 15 years. It's a business that probably had 180 billion of assets under management. Today, it's 1.4 trillion. So there is a lot of capital out there for a big investment need. And in my opinion, the next decade to 2 decades is going to be all about decarbonization of real assets. And we have a big advantage and a big head start here, given the team and the scale that we have inside the Rise Climate platform. For transition infrastructure right now, there are a few themes that we're thinking a lot about. First, in the energy transition space, we do think there's going to be an opportunity to help out some existing renewable platforms that are out there that either need more capital to grow or potentially even to send capital back to their LPs. We are also thinking a lot about the green mobility space, and we're not thinking a lot about necessarily electric cars, but we have been thinking about fleets, whether that's buses or rail or trucks, almost a B2B theme in green mobility. And then we are spending time in the waste theme, and whether that's environmental services, landfill avoidance, more circular use of waste. So as we think about the energy transition, and specifically our first investment is in that space. It's in a business called Altus Power. They're the second largest distributed generation company in the US. And I think they will be a big part of the future of the power markets in the US. Altus helps commercial customers and industrial customers, and in some case, residential customers have behind the meter solutions, which mean they're not necessarily attached to the grid, either through outfitting tops of buildings with solar panels or car parks with solar panels in order to provide power at a discount to what otherwise those companies would be procuring from the grid. What I'm most excited about for really the next 5 to 10 years in this business is that I truly believe we're entering a time when the infrastructure market is pivoting to decarbonization of all of these real assets that will need to scale and build. It's broadening and becoming more complex. And I think we've got the depth of knowledge, the ecosystem, and the people to be really successful in this business.
It's fascinating to watch the global discussion on energy transition today. There's obviously a lot of debate going on in the US, and that debate is grabbing the microphone worldwide. And yet when you think about the energy addition in front of us over the next year, only 10% of it is in the US. In some ways, it's a massive exercise in separating the signal from the noise. But the signal we see on the ground at our companies where growth and impact is happening with increasing speed and scale, that signal is where we need to keep our eye.
Europe is now looking a much more favorable place to be in terms of relative stability. And we've been able to deploy resources that would otherwise have been focused on opportunities in the US into Europe. So that sort of flexibility that we have within the team has been a great strength as we see how these markets ebb and flow and where the best risk-adjusted returns can be achieved.
You have to look geography by geography, factor in the specific nuance of what they bring to the table, and then get to the cleanest solution as quickly as possible, recognizing that the other piece of this is economic mobility is inextricably tied to energy availability. The predictability of energy use versus per capita income is a bulletproof relationship. So in parts of the world where people are coming out of poverty, to do that requires more energy. So the other thing that we look at, particularly through the lens of our Global South initiative, is how can we enable bringing power, hopefully green power, to the parts of the world where you're talking about a very different equation where adding energy is critical to economic mobility.
In Africa, we think the clean electron space is really where we'll put most of our money to work. There's often this question as to whether it's transition or addition. In Africa, it's very much addition. Roughly 50% of the population of Africa do not have access to reliable electricity. And the opportunity we have is to really mirror what happened in the telephony industry, where people just skipped the landlines and went to mobile phones in Africa. We think we can do the same in Africa with respect to electricity provision. So just go directly to clean electricity. And the reason why we're able to do it is that the economics of, say, solar energy have improved so much that in many countries it's actually less expensive. So just put aside even the climate impacts, which are substantial, of course. As an economic matter, it actually makes more sense to go clean.
India is a very large topographical landscape. 1 in 5 people in the world are in India. But at the same time, some of the societal and climate problems that India is faced with is actually unparalleled in the world. To give you an example, 6 out of the top 10 polluted cities in the world belong in India. So as India thinks about solving the climate problem, it's actually faced with a very interesting trilemma, which is India has to think about energy security. 30% of India's energy is imported. India needs to change that from a geopolitical perspective. India is the 3rd largest growing market in terms of energy consumption. It is the fastest growing energy market globally. And at the same time, affordability, which is driving new energy demand or driving new energy supply, is really going to come from renewable energy, not just because it's green and it's better for environment, but because it is 40-50% cheaper than actually doing it on coal or on any gas-based power plants. So we are actually seeing some very interesting opportunities emerge from India, which are driven by fundamental business economics and fundamental socio-political objectives. If you think about sort of us doing the Siemens Gamesa transaction, where we've carved out the onshore wind business of Siemens for India and South Asia, this was a competitive process, but we actually sought exclusivity because Siemens saw us as great partners to help build the business in India. But at the same time, we brought a very interesting set of relationships to this deal. A $45 billion industrial conglomerate partnered with us to do this transaction because they thought we could bring the set of partnerships, the execution capability to drive the platform going forward. Our whole thesis for the Siemens Gamesa transaction is to not just be the preferred highest quality product supplier in wind turbine market in India, which is, by the way, growing orders of magnitude, but at the same time, actually become the preferred manufacturing location for Siemens Gamesa's global supply chain. So this partnership with Siemens and this platform opportunity is not just to deliver wind turbines in India and sort of drive that wind turbine adoption or the wind energy adoption in the country, but it is also for Siemens Gamesa to think about its strategic sourcing within its global supply chain.
The Rise funds have really built their entire operating model on the idea of and, not or. That we could deliver full returns and noticeable, demonstrable impact. That's really required us to put as much work into measuring our impact as we do to measuring the underwriting of our financial aspirations. Y Analytics is one of the differentiators for our platform.
Y Analytics is the impact assessment arm and responsible investing arm of TPG. When we first created TPG Rise Climate, we were looking back at the increase in the pipeline that we were seeing in the numerous climate deals that were coming through to us. And there were some important pieces that we saw right away. We looked at the drawdown potential from an emissions perspective that different subsectors within climate could have, and we looked at the returns profile. So from the very beginning, we were looking at those two as an integrated view. It's been really important for us to look at climate solutions through the lens of the carbon aversion potential that they have. These are companies whose products and services are helping others to decarbonize. Most of the metrics in the industry are focused on what's called scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Those companies that are already emitting reduce their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. But if you are looking at and evaluating and investing in companies whose products and services are going to help to decarbonize, the most important metric is what's the carbon aversion potential of those companies. And that's a radically different view, but we've really honed in on that carbon aversion methodology. Across TPG Rise Climate 1, the first fund, we estimate there's about 900 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions that will be averted over the lifetime of those assets. And again, it's an estimate, but what that does is it helps us to understand whether the portfolio that we're creating is truly delivering at scale. One of the things that's really important to our work is the use of research and of high quality research. Part of our role not only is to conduct the assessments, but it's actually to follow and stay attuned and abreast of new research. And there are a few areas where we hope to see much deeper research. So for example, within adaptation and resilience, looking at the increased frequency of certain kinds of events like wildfires or storms, really tuning in the science around how we can start to estimate the increased frequency is a nascent field, but again, is a really important research field. So we hope that these fields will continue to emerge.
As I look ahead, energy transition investing is one of the biggest investment themes of the next 20, 30 years. At TPG, we're well-versed in taking complex markets and finding workable solutions. We've done that in technology, we've done that in transportation, we've done that in healthcare. So that same approach is what we bring to climate. It begins with deciding not what's for sale, but what you want to buy. Surveying the marketplace to find solutions that we believe work at economic models that we believe will scale. I think the technologies and business models around climate investing are evolving quickly, and you'll access that evolution in the private market. We invest in climate across private equity and infrastructure. And really, it's part of taking a broad approach to climate generally. We do that from a sector point of view, and we do that from an asset class point of view. As we look ahead to the next 10 years of climate investing, we see a new set of opportunities emerging. Nuclear, long talked about, is now becoming actionable in the marketplace, and we expect it to become an increasing part of our activity set over the next 5 to 10 years. Electric aviation has reached a new point in its development. Add all of those opportunities together with the advent of AI and other things we've been talking about the last couple of years, and it's going to be a rich and fascinating set of opportunities for decades to come.